Indeed, we're proudly Nigerians, and this is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And to begin and set the tone for our conversation today on Nigeria's latest inflation figures, let's take this background report by Timothy Yusuf.
Nigeria's latest inflation figures show a decline in the headline inflation rate to 22.22% in June 2025, down from 22.97% in May 2025. Analysts say this marks the third consecutive month of decline. The highlighted key inflation figures to include headline inflation rate of 22.22% in June 2025, food inflation rate of 21.97% year-on-year in June 2025, with significant monthly increases in prices of staples like green peas, pepper, shrimps, crayfish, meat, tomatoes, plantain flour, and ground pepper. Meanwhile, month-on-month inflation rate, experts explained, stood at 1.68% in June 2025, up from 1.53% in May 2025. Core inflation rate of 22.76 year-on-year in June 2025, up from 22.28% in May 2025. For regional variations, highest food inflation in Borno State, for instance, stood at 47.40%, Ebonyi 30.62%, and Bayelsa 28.64% on a year-on-year basis. In the meantime, lowest food inflation in Katsina State was 6.21%, Adamawa 10.90%, and Sokoto 15.25% on a year-on-year basis. Experts believe that the decline in inflation rate is attributed to various factors, including the Central Bank of Nigeria's monetary policy reforms and the high base year effect from last year's inflation reading. However, inflation remains a significant challenge, with prices of essential goods and services continuing to rise. Let's now join our guests in the studio for further breakdown of Nigeria's latest inflation figures. It's Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Timothy Yusuf, for that background report. Yes, it's Good Morning Nigeria, and we are looking at Nigeria's latest inflation figures. We already have our guest in the studio with us to discuss this latest development. First is Dr. Ayo Anthony. He's the head price division, National Bureau of Statistics. Dr. Anthony, it's good to have you again.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm happy to be here once again as well.
All right. Thank you. Also joining us in the studio is Dr. Emeka Okengo, a development economist. Dr. Emeka Okengo, you're welcome.
It's always an honor to be here. Thanks for the invite. Good morning.
It's an honor to have you join us. We have regulars in the studio this morning, and also joining us is Nia Kisiju, Finance and Investment Expert, Chairman, Independent Media and Policy Initiative. You're welcome to Good Morning
Thanks so much
Nigeria.
for having me.
And also joining us from Kaduna studio is Sushao Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, and also Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics, Kaduna State University. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, Nigerians.
Prof, maybe we just stay with you, Prof, and let's get your initial reactions to these latest inflation figure, and what do you think are the main drivers of this trend?
As the report we have just for 3 months we have had successive reduction, which is encouraging. It is encouraging in the sense that we are seeing reduction. You know, compared to last year, we were at about 34.something%. Now that we are at 22%, it's a major reduction. What is driving it basically? Various reductions in certain cost areas. You know, normally the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics have a basket of products that they look at, and substantially we have had reductions in some lines of products, and we have, of course, as is usual, in a basket of products, you have some that have increased, but the gradual decrease is a very good omen. The only concern, of course, is if you look at our own environment vis-a-vis our neighbors, our interest rate, rather level of inflation is a bit high, 22.2% compared to what you see in our neighbors, Benin Republic, Niger, Cameroon, Ghana, and the like, who are, all of them below 10%. So that is a major factor to consider. But otherwise, I think it's encouraging that we are having a reduction. Of course, a part of the reduction was because there was a reduction compared to last year, majorly on cost of food commodities, especially food products, even though, of course, in the last 1 month, we have seen some few of them increasing, fish, pepper, and the like, meat. These are minor items compared to major costs, let's say, of rice, of sorghum, of maize, of soybeans, products that are staple, in the Nigerian normal households. So these are matters to consider and to look at. But by and large, I think substantially we can say we are happy that there is a reduction, and it's a gradual, continuous reduction.
In statements there on the inflation rates, and it's good news for Nigerians. Let's return to the studio. Mr. Anthony, how significant now is the role of the CPI in the reported decline of the inflation rate?
Okay, thank you.
According to the NBS.
I want to use this medium to make some correction.
Okay.
Because somebody was talking on this figure yesterday, and the Station General drew my attention to it. And I said, when I come here this morning, I will make some clarification. When you talk of headline inflation is not limited to the year-on-year. There are two dimensions to headline inflation.
Okay.
When they say headline inflation, is the inflation that involves all the items in the basket. Presently, we have about 936 items in our basket. When you talk of headline, it's all called all-item inflation. And there are two dimensions to it. It can be year-on-year or month-on-month. But many people always limit headline inflation to year-on-year.
But we are now discussing month-on-month.
We have the year-on-year is one we reported as 22.22.
Okay.
While the month-on-month is 1.68. Meaning that from May compared to June, average prices of goods and services have changed by 1.68%. But compared to June 2024, that is 12-month calendar, average price of goods and services has increased by 22.22%. Now, to come to your question, prices of goods and services are still on the upturn on the average, not downturn yet. When I say on the average, some are coming down, some are going up. So when you find the midpoint, the average, all things on the average, prices are still in the upturn. Why do we say so? Many people look at the percentage change that give the inflation rate. They don't look at the base, which is the consumer price index itself. The consumer price index of June 2025, is 123 basis points. While the last month own was 121 basis points. What is the difference? 2 basis points. That means on the average, prices of goods and services in Nigeria are still increasing by 2 basis points. Now, when you now find the percentage difference between two-dimensional CPI, when I say two-dimensional, this month and last month, or this month and this period last year. So this month and this period last year give percentage change of 22.22%. Why this month compared to last month produce 1.68% percentage changes, meaning that prices are going up. But the reason why we say is, May 2025, we have 22.97.
Yeah.
While the current period we are referring to is 22.22. You can say the percentage change is reducing, meaning that prices are increasing at a decreasing rate. Not that prices are not going up, but the rate at which prices of goods and services are increasing now is declining compared to preceding period.
Okay, so what do you think is responsible for that?
Thank you very much. There are many factors.
Okay.
Presently, in economics, that's what we call reaction function. When I say reaction function, it gets to a point that you have to react. If price of goods are going up, and those goods are relatively elastic in nature, if I don't have money, will I kill myself? I will not buy. So households are reacting. If I'm buying 2 units of bread before, 2 loaves of bread before, let me buy what? 1. Another technical factor is what we call base effect in prices. Prices of goods and services this period, 2024, the CPI was already high. And you know, it's a comparative index. When you are comparing something with something that is already high in the base period, you expect a decline. So technically, the reduction in inflation we're experiencing can be adduced to the base effect. Okay. It can also be adduced to the money in the economy. Monetary policy measure these days tight. Where is the money in the economy? Especially an inflation that is demand pull inflation. Inflation that is caused by excess money in circulation, chasing fewer goods and services. The money, look at the interest rate. High. Money supply, reducing. So the aggregate demand is reducing compared to aggregate what? Supply. So definitely price has to reduce based on what we call transmission mechanism.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Anthony, for your opening remarks there. Let's come to Dr. Okengu. We're looking at this inflation, the latest inflation figures, and let's get your reactions to that. And how do you think it will actually impact the average Nigerian, particularly in terms of purchasing power and cost of living?
Thank you. Let's take it from the point of nutrition, which is at the base of most things. For us, the older ones, to keep healthy. For the younger ones, to now build the proper characteristics to function well. And if we have a situation where we are now forced to maybe not buy at all, Dr. Tony had said, if you don't have money, you won't buy. And then you're not able to buy these essentials that you need, either as an older person or, more importantly, for the young ones who are looking at disaster. It's even more so when you see that the thing is still oscillating. Food inflation is at about 52% if you're mixing it with energy. And these are the 2 basic things that run us. Why Dr. Tony was very correct to talk about the indicators. Maybe from a development perspective, the primary cause will be that we are not productive enough. I don't want to use the word that we are not productive. If you go to a staple like ginger, for instance, is off the table, is off the market. Okay, and nobody has tried to bother to find out why. Is it pest? Is it land? Is it threat? And so many other things. And if you're looking at these greens, well, what will make bread be expensive? You might just link it to grains. You might link it to flour. You might link it to the cost of even foreign exchange to bring them in. So it's easy for us to be mathematical and statistical, okay, at the level of now trying to define what it is. But I think it's also important that we drill it down. Look at a country that has 320 dams, talking about fish prices going up because you don't have one dam that is producing commercial, scale fish, not one. And even the Lake Chad, where you keep talking about Maiduguri, cost of food getting more expensive in Maiduguri. There are 2 things to it. Thing number 1, might be that you're not producing at all. Onions used to be, one of the major outputs from Maiduguri, where you come from, Jumai. I wouldn't be very surprised if people are now importing onions or getting onions from Sokoto. I wouldn't be.
Yes, okay. Indeed. Sometimes, yes, because the main onion farms in Maiduguri is around Bama area.
So these are the challenges. So you see, what we need to do is to, yes, Dr. Tony must do his job, and that is what he's done. But it's also important that we try to link this to our fiscal policies, because it's very important. What are we doing to be able to now promote, indigenous growth of our production patterns? There is nothing that's not a staple. Meat is staple. Rice is staple. Gari is staple. There's nothing that comes into our food systems, that is not very important now. So for me, to answer your question directly, the impact is terrible. It's going to be impacting on the young ones negatively. That it's going to be stunting growth. For those of us who will be needing some nutritional support because we're over 60, it's also going to be quite tough, okay, because you're not able to now afford, the basic you need, to probably have a healthy life. That would be my opinion.
Interesting. Mr. Nee, how does persistent food and core inflation affect poverty reduction and income inequality in Nigeria? Because Dr. Okongwu is saying that when inflation goes high on food, it affects the people. How does it reflect on the daily life of Nigerians?
It's not the importance and the symbolism of food in the Nigerian inflation basket. It's not a recent thing. It's given that most households spend a larger percentage of their income, on food. So anytime there is an increase in food inflation, it presupposes a burden, a cost burden on the household. And of course, inflation itself determines the numbers of people that also circled into poverty. And of course, again, reduction in inflation rates, it also determines how automatically they circle out. So if we are seeing cases or occasions of increase in inflation rates, we are actually, by calculation, adding up how many people are gone, below the poverty line. So it is always a border when there is an increase in inflation, in food inflation. And that is my border in this particular inflation figures that we have. Perhaps for the first time in a long while, we are seeing cost increase around major indexes. Food inflation gone up month on month, year on year too. Core inflation, that used to be the playground for us, especially those of us that think around the fiscal federalism and all that, is also up, month on month, year on year. So of course, it would appear, that what we have now is more of a technical, decline. Good for our psychology, good for our outlook, But the truth of the matter is, if you have a month-on-month inflation moving from 1.53, percentage point to 1.68 percentage points, it tells you that there was a lot of momentum in cost activities in the last 30 days, between May and June. And you also are also seeing year-on-year, month-on-month on food inflation, 21.14 to 21.97 or thereabouts. Again, it tells us that definitely some food items had left the tables of some households. And that, of course, presupposes the fact that a number of people cannot afford to, to feed themselves very well. So it translates to increase in poverty. That is what those figures are saying. But again, these figures are also saying that the level of increase, the cost increase, are also being tempered, which, of course, tells us that perhaps with policy intervention or intensification of policy implementation, commitment to the policy implementation, these issues will be assuaged, the kind of figures we have now is very strategic. For the first time, you have a figure that I see the CBN, for instance, laboring on, to take a decision. You have two sides. The headline inflation had fallen, which should, of course, excite policymakers, especially in the CBN. But again, you also see all these other components of the headline inflation moving up. And the expectation over the last so many months is that the CBN had been consistent in monetary tightening, that now that we have seen a trend over a 3-month period of a decline in inflation rate, the argument will be, is it not time for CBN to start reducing its monetary policy, monetary policy rates? So these are the issues that will be in front of the CBN, with these figures, as it were. But I think there is also a need to use this figure to determine what manner of policy deployments, especially in the physical side, that will need to be implemented.
So how does that impact development goals?
Well, that is the figures, the statistics, the data, as it were, are telling us the need, of course, for policies to be more inclusive, to drive more production and productivity in the two main range of economic activities in the country: agriculture, manufacturing. And of course, the border again is that there are projections already that in the month of July and August, food inflation may even become critical, because these again are the times, for instance, in the southern region, you had a lot of rain. Flooding, may be recorded, and when you have flooding, it impacts agriculture, food production. In the north too, you have areas there they also experience a lot of flooding, and it also affects food production. You have the issues of security, which is not just it's no longer just about keeping yourself alive. It's also about keeping food farm going. So we are having a kind of agglomeration of factors that are kind of coming together to impact and create a risk environment, for existence and good living and livelihood too.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Now let's get back to Prof in Kaduna studio, and let's get your view on the fact that what policy measures, because according to what Chief Akinshiju just said now, that government or the CBN needs to reduce its monetary policy rate. From you as a professor of economics and finance, what do you think? I mean, what measures do you think the government should put in place to sustain the decline in inflation and promote economic stability?
First of all, let me correct. I'm not a professor of economics. I'm a professor of finance and entrepreneurship. There are a number of things that need to be done and a number of policies. Some of them, if you look at it very closely, may counter each other. But, if you remember, and in fact, let me, even before I answer this, let me go back to the issue of food and food inflation, because I think that is, from the last two comments, it appears to be a major issue that is being discussed. Now, if you look at it, the background about this inflation in Nigeria as a whole, because for this program, we're just looking at what happened between May and June. But if you look at the background originally, the first thing was removal of subsidy, which happened in 2023. Then, of course, the exchange, the attempt to merge the various rates of exchange rates. Those are the various factors that actually propelled the economy and in terms of inflation, and that was what happened. And basically, we are saying that despite measures that have been taken, because government had taken some measures, last year around this time, there was huge cost, when you look at food, especially food inflation, and it was a matter of concern to government. Now, what government decided to do then, and I believe that is why we are not at last year's level in terms of growth year on year or month on month, as the case may be, was because government decided to open a window and imported quite a number of major staples. Quite a number of major staples were brought in. Now, why I say some of these things sometimes counteract one another is that in attempt to do that, in attempts to reduce the cost of food or reduce food inflation, this was done. And of course, that means dumping more or less this kind of products into Nigeria. For the farmers that have produced already, it means they have produced probably at a higher cost. They have now been made, to sell some of these products at whatever the market can take. And that means, huge reduction, despite their cost of production. So that is what happened. You remember, on another side, we also are faced with the issue of poverty, which is a major factor and a major issue in the country. We know over 130 million Nigerians are below the poverty line. We also know that over 70% or about 70% of Nigerians are farmers. So you can now see that there's a direct relationship between the decision, the policy, to now bring in food and import it massively and increase in poverty. So what I'm trying to say is that regardless of whatever money market will do, whatever the fiscal authorities will do, all of these policies, you have to look at them, and weigh them as it is and decide on the best way to do things. Right now, as I'm telling you, the prices of foodstuff, especially I'm talking about these major staples. I'm talking about rice, I'm talking about soybeans, I'm talking about maize, I'm talking about sorghum, and things like that. The prices have crashed. In fact, there is no market. I have said it here in this program that, over time, that I'm a farmer myself. So I know that I've taken my goods to the market for 3 markets now, and I've not been able to sell them. Why? Because of these imported ones that were produced, that were dumped that were coming at a lower price. So now look at this. What I'm saying is that look at these various policies and decisions that have been made by various agencies of government and various arms of government. Now, when we are talking about the monetary authorities, what they are trying to do basically in terms of increasing interest rate, or rather is to manage the funds, the cash flow in the economy, to ensure that there is not too much cash chasing too few products. And in that process, it reduces inflation. But now, if they are to reduce it, it means more money available and probably even more inflation. That is likely what is going to happen. So what I'm saying is that in all these policies that government is making, either at CBN in monetary terms or at on the fiscal aspect of it, in making all these decisions, we have to consider the ramifications and the possible implications of whatever policies that have been brought to play.
Can you tell us how significant the role of the rebased CPI is in the reported decline now?
Basically, is just to give us a starting point, a reference point, where to start from. And that's just basically what it is. So it's a technical thing, rather than basing our inflation rate on certain years, we're now using so year as a base. That's all we do. So really, it is just for reporting purposes. It does not have any major implication for the actual what happens in the market. So rebasing, and it makes sense, that they are now rebasing it based on 2023, I think, or 2024. It makes a lot more sense than what we had last year when we were using 2009 as the year of reference. I believe the closer the better for terms, for getting, or rather for being able to have something that is close to reality. So rebasing is in order, but it's just a technical window or opportunity, so that you know where you are starting from.
Thank you very much, Prof. Let's come back to the studio. Dr. Anthony, just like you have heard Prof said that, some of the contributors to this inflation figure is as a result of the removal of the subsidy, just like some people have also said, and the pairing of the Naira. and probably the insecurity. Do you agree with all this assessment?
Yes, definitely. Shock is inevitable in an economy. If you move your economy that you don't have shock internally, it can come externally. So when there are shocks, definitely there must be a response. And one of the variables that respond faster to shock is price level. Insecurity is a shock that has been with us for long. Some months ago, somebody criticized our figure. He said, why will food-producing states like Benue have high inflation, while consuming states has low inflation? I just laugh. I say, you are an expert, you should have answer to it. The so-called food-producing states, how many of them are producing at their optimal level? Insecurity. And the so-called food-producing states, as they produce and they harvest, merchants go there and buy almost everything in bulk and take to the so-called consuming states. The residual left in the so-called producing state will be at high price level. So do you expect inflation in such a state not to be higher than consuming state? So insecurity is a factor, a significant factor we need to address. And as we all know, food constitutes more than 40% of the weight of the item in our basket. So whatever happened to food has a greater multiplier effect on the headline inflation. Another factor that is driving inflation in Nigeria, as Prof said, is money. Yeah, inflation in Nigeria is a monetary phenomenon. If I have money in my hand today, definitely what I don't plan to buy, I will buy it. We call it marginal propensity to consume. It is induced by additional income. So as income comes in, I buy more. And the available goods in the economy or in the society may not be enough to absorb additional demand. What happens to price? It will go up. Another factor that is critical to inflation in Nigeria is cost of production. As my Oga here said the other time, the supply side is suffering in Nigeria. Many firms are not producing at their full capacity. Even the ones that are producing at full capacity, they are incurring costs. And they have to transfer this additional cost to final consumer in form of increase in price of goods and what? And services. So if the cost of production in the economy can be looked into efficiently, it will have a long way in reducing inflation figure in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Anthony. We just want to inform our viewers that you also can contribute to this discussion. You can send in your questions, you can send in your comments via the numbers on your screen, displayed on your screen. You can send your text messages or send your questions through WhatsApp. Okay, Juma.
Yes, we're expecting your questions so that we understand, you understand how the inflation rate works. Mr. Okwango, you're an agriculturist, and we just read in the headlines of the papers this morning that rice farmers, grain farmers are now not in the market because of the high cost of fertilizer. And it's affecting everybody. Food is very important. I remember like 10 years ago with 30,000, you go into the market, you come out with a load of things. Now with 30,000, it's just a leather bag. Bread is even 2,000 naira. So what does the common Nigeria begin to understand all these technical jargons of the CPI, inflation rate and all that? How do they begin to understand? Because I'm sure a lot of viewers watching us today are very, very interested in knowing.
Well, you see, that's what I've tried to keep away from the technical details. I leave it to
yes.
I leave it to Dr. Tony. It is forte. But I try to drill it down so that everybody can be part of it. And let's use the word farmer as against the population. When you used to go to the market and get what you were getting at 30,000, how many people were living then? What was our population? And what was our farming methods? Now, the farming methods is very critical to the volumes that you create. And the volumes that you create are the basis of unlocking the value that comes with it. When you mention food production states, and somebody mentions Benue, how many commercial farms do you have in Benue? How many commercial farms did you used to have in Benue? For emphasis, at one time, Benue probably had one of the biggest poultries in the whole of Nigeria. Had the Taraku mills, had even a ranch. I think they also had a tomato or something, canning system. But where are they now? For how long have they functioned? And how long, have they been dysfunctional? So first and foremost, you need to give a proper definition to the word farmer, so that we know we're not talking about somebody who is a gardener, because there's a difference between a farmer and a gardener. And so you're able to now juxtapose the volume he can bring to the market. Okay, that can now begin to now challenge, the ones that you're importing. Then this is one part of the story. The second part is that I think that Nigeria might be one of the few countries that has the volume of population we have that is not putting food substitution, or farm substitution as a major government policy. There is no other country in the world, fact check it, that does not first and foremost do what they call farm gate, procurement, and then production support through subsidies. None. America, Germany, Britain, name it. They subsidize their farmers to the point that even if you're producing at a loss, you're in business, because government mops up and then makes it that they pay you premium at every point in time. If that was happening, a professor in Kaduna would not need to go to the market 3 times to try to sell his goods. Because what has happened from his own example is now there are now 3 other costs of transportation to those goods, because he didn't carry it on his head. By the time he's going back into the market the 4th time, you will now find out that he's not going to be loading those logistics costs, those transport costs, those storage costs onto what it is he's going to be selling. But if he had a system where everything he had produced would have been mopped up at farm gates, all right, he now knows that what I've produced is gone, even if it's in my storage. There's somebody who's off-taking it at that primary level. So if we want to change these things, sometimes people say removal of subsidy. I am an advocate. I support it. That's the only way to have gone. Okay, in fact, when President Jonathan was president, I think he was in this studio, and I said, remove subsidy. And then some bloggers, started flagging my name. I was promoting removal of subsidy, and again, attack his office. They said, listen, let's be real. If we don't remove subsidy, if we don't take decisions and government does not do what we are doing now, we're going to be having children who are stunted in growth. We're going to be having a country that nobody can live in. So what it is we need to do is to look at those various factors. And I just raised one issue. Let me raise another one. 85 million hectares of land, arable. Like I said, 320 dams existing, not to be built. All right? Yet, we are not self-sufficient in anything. You've talked about rice. Rice was one of the things we celebrated that we have gotten self-sufficient on. And I think I remember in those days, he was also here in your studio, and I said, NTA, have you gone to do a Vox Post? Have you gone to these rice fields? Because from my own statistics, the largest rice production system we have in Nigeria is the Olam farms, which at then was about 10,000 hectares of land. Now, if we have Olam with 10,000 hectares of land as the biggest farm, where are we getting all these thousands and thousands of pyramids that were stacking up? Of course, people didn't like it. So if you want us to change the way we think, I think we need to be fact-based. We need to now drive our systems based on data. Okay, there's been this argument. The Ministry of Agriculture has come as ever to say, oh, we didn't do any importations. Okay, now, if those importations were they done as primary importations, or were they done as substitution, or what we call import substitution? Those are, again, 2 different things. Okay. If it were done as primary importations, then this is why you now have this flooding. But if you did it as import substitutions, then it was supposed to now be supporting what it is you already had in storage. If you don't have the statistics of who's producing and where you can mop, how do you now know what you have in storage? If you have silos and you are not linking those silos, to form to food systems that are able to now give the surplus or primary, how do you now know what you're subsidizing? So do you mind to answer you very quickly? Fertilizer is also, for me, not a good one. For a country that has probably one of the biggest organic fertilizer systems, the Kaduna Phosphate fertilizer production plant was one of the biggest in Africa. The carcass is still there, staring everybody in the face. And then you have Sokoto State with all the whole, tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of phosphate lying there in the Wuruno, area and other places around the country. Let's not even talk about NAFCON. So why on earth would us as a country be talking about that we can't get fertilizer? It doesn't make any sense. So it's for us to be a little measured, okay? It's for us to understand that there's a back end, okay, to everything you want to do. And that back end is the foundation. So if you don't get that foundation right and then get the things that support your foundation right, you're going to be having outputs that will be technical, okay? And then the more technical it becomes, the more people are getting confused. I'm sure that a lot of Tony's friends will be very angry with him. You come here and tell us that this thing is reducing. I'm not able to buy food. And people don't understand that what Tony is actually, trying to explain is what he has to explain. It's not his job, okay, as a statistician, to go and tell people to go to the farm. It is his job to say this is what is available, this is what we can be able to, and against what's available, this is what the situation is.
Actually, he explained that although the inflation figure reduced a bit, but the rate of prices still keep going up. But the rate at which they go up has also reduced. That's his explanation.
In some areas.
That the rate of increment has reduced, not as before.
Okay. If you're buying
right?
buying a bag of rice at 100,000 now, and your salary is 300,000, there is no way you can buy rice for yourself, buy for your mom, buy for your in-law, and buy for your brothers. No way.
Then you don't buy a bag.
Hold on. Hold on. So that is it. If you don't buy, they starve. Understand what I'm saying? So what it is you need to do is to look at the statistics. What you need to do is not to say, I won't buy a bag. How am I able to now increase the production so that my 300,000 can be able to get me the 6, 7. We used to buy one bag of rice for 8,000 in this country for crying out aloud. Yeah, and this wasn't 10 years ago. It's the same rice. So the problem will be what changed.
Just like we said earlier, I mean, the removal of the subsidy and all the insecurity and the pairing of the naira, all those
so
factors.
Why don't you include increased production of rice?
Yes.
If you remove, sorry, I'm not trying for us to be argumentative.
Yes.
If you remove subsidy and you increase your rice fields, if you had 100,000 hectares of land under cultivation for rice, if you had 200,000 hectares of land under cultivation for rice, would you have more outputs?
Of course, there will be.
Would it impact on whatever subsidies you have removed, ultimately? Now, this is where we talk about the demand pool, the supply side effect. So these are things that you need to be measured about. You create that framework and then you begin to work at it. Otherwise, we're going to be having these figures 1% up, 2% down. We clap. 3% up, 4% down. What we should be talking about is that inflation has to be single digit for us to have made any meaningful progress. That's my position.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, inflation has to be single digits, just like we have in neighboring countries, But I know we have had the Minister of State for Agriculture here in the studio to tell us what government is doing, to ensure that there is full security in the country. And yes, but just like we said, the challenges of security challenges and all that are some of the factors. Well, Chief Akishiju, let's just look at how government can balance now, because there is an issue. So what can government do to actually balance or control inflation with the need to stimulate economic growth? What do you think government should do?
That's the biggest question. what we have been saying all along, merely theorizing, because our reality is that for every action, there are a number of reactions.
Yeah.
And of course, the two main broad authorities, the fiscal authorities and the monetary policy authorities, needs, of course, to create a balancing act, as it were. Subsidies was removed. Foreign exchange windows harmonized. And this freed up a lot of revenue, for the federal government, for all the levels of government. Yeah. So much that at the last FAC meeting, we had a historical 1.818 trillion to be shared, historical. So compare that to sometimes in April 2024, April 2023, when available revenue to be shared was less than 500 billion naira. So what tells what we are seeing now, it's a quantum leap in liquidity. And so you have that 1.81 trillion, the total, revenue generated in June, was up to 4.3232 trillion. The CBN would have to be conscious of the fact that if you allow this huge revenue, injected into the economy, it will, of course, create an overflow in the economy. And, of course, the line of thinking, if you have a huge liquidity, demand pool, and all that, it also, induces inflation. Now, the government, the CBN, in its wisdom, has now said, no, okay, we are going to sustain that our benchmark rates at 27.5%, so that we reduce the tendency, for expansion. We reduce the tendency for cheap credit, as it were. And it's cheap credit, in truth, that also allows for production and productivity. We are talking of a trilemma already. And it could go on and on. So at what point in time do we find an equilibrium, a certain balance amongst and between all these factors, in such a way that the CBN is comfortable with the liquidity that is in the economy, in such a way that we have enough liquidity in the economy that can drive production and productivity. So if you want to increase the numbers of land available to be employed in the farm, how do we also source the fund in a way that it won't impact liquidity in the economy? So these are considerations that needs to be balanced, and I think to a large extent, give it to the governments. I believe that this economy is still in transition. It's been a long time we had this kind of good dilemma, as it were. What we used to have were concerns over revenue, because we are tied our revenue, to subsidy, to also subsidizing our foreign exchange. So now we are freeing up more revenue for government use. But now in doing that too, you are also challenged by how you manage the liquidity in the system. So for me, the idea is now to start targeting. I will first commend the CBN, even if what we have now is a technical decline in inflation to 22.22. The truth of the matter is it's nearing CBN target of 21.4 for the year 2025. So it's good. But would we be able to achieve the 15% the federal government had also targeted for 2025 in the MTF? If we are able to achieve that, of course it will translate no matter what, to impacting the streets. And that is the ultimate. Because for us to be able, and there are experts that are positive about this trend, that it would, of course, by the end of this year, we are most likely to go into that sub 18, sub 17 range. And if we are able to do that, it also would mean that it's likely we are attending to food production or increase in food availability. They are two different things. I think what the government has done at one point in time is to provide availability. It may not be increasing production, you know. So, but when an economy is in transition, there is always that effort to identify and acknowledge what is not available, especially to the common people, you know, in a way that the growth will not be as we experienced in the 2010, 2014, 2011 period, where we are seeing increased growth, but no impactful impact, you know, on the common people. So I am expecting a situation where agriculture will be given a special place. It's still very important, where there will be targeted credits, you know, to agriculture, where there will be more consummate relationship between the private sector, you know, and the government. We still need a lot of government activities in providing, you know, agriculture. If we are talking about fertilizer scarcity in today's Nigeria, it should be a concern, because I know that over a period of time, the Dangote Petroleum Company had started even exporting fertilizer outside Nigeria, you know. And I also know that at a point in time, the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority had also resurrected about 30 fertilizer blending plants. So what happened to all those plants, you know, that we are talking about, fertilizer? That should be the list of our problems, as it were.
Okay.
So what happened to all those plants? My producer is saying that we should take a break now. The conversation will continue on with the time. If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA, and we're talking about the latest inflation rate in Nigeria. And Nigerians also want to contribute to this conversation. Let me quickly go to Yusuf Abdul from Zaria. He said, what is the present status of the Anko Borrower scheme that was acclaimed to be highly successful? And that's Yusuf Abdul Zaria. And another one said, good morning, my name is Daniel from Jos. I want to thank both Dr. Okwengu and Dr. Nii for being pragmatic in answering these questions. Please, Mr. Okwengu, I hope to meet you in person someday, because I would like to become one of your mentees.
Wow.
Thank you so much. He said, God bless Nigeria.
You already have a fan.
Yes, and Muhammad Awal Musa Afoima from Kano said, no any price decline on goods from my end here. Good morning, Nigeria. And the drop in the, Dr. Abbas G. Idris said, the drop in the inflation rate index is not to be celebrated at this farming season. Prices on food are relatively cheap. Farmers cannot break even. The cost of fertilizer now is between 50,000 naira to 70,000 per bag, while a bag of maize is 35,000 naira to 40,000 naira. There's looming food insecurity this year because most farmers cannot afford fertilizer to farm rice and maize. The government should find means of subsidizing fertilizer as a matter of emergency. And Hajia Jumwe and good morning, he said, Hajia Jumwe and Dr. Tony. I like hearing honest people like Dr. Tony. Please, ma, may you invite Dr. Tony to lecture Nigerians always on the topic of inflation. Smile like a fire from Kongolada. And Edith Isang and Abuja said inflation in Nigeria right now can only be tamed by radical fiscal measures. Government should act more to provide security. More money should be spent to rehabilitate existing roads than on constructing new ones. And finally, there should be a determined pursuit of the CNG initiative. Mr. Tony, can you respond to some of them?
Yeah. Thank you. One thing I want to say is this. I've had it in mind before. The purpose of statistics is for economic agents to take rational and efficient decision. When we release our figures, households are meant to use to take informed decision. Firms, the same thing, even governments. But one thing is that when statistics are being released, people do not even understand the meaning of that statistic, and they begin to criticize it.
That is why you're here.
Now, number two, somebody was saying inflation in Niger is lower than that of Nigeria. Inflation in Niger can be lower than that of Nigeria, and the price of goods and services can still be higher in Niger than Nigeria. It sounds paradoxical, which is the reality. CPI measure changes in prices, not price level. USA released the inflation figure for June last week. It was 0.4. It's 0.4. While Nigeria is 22.22. But let me tell you, an item like this in United States of America compared to Nigeria is more expensive. But the only thing is that that price in USA can be the same for more than a year. While in Nigeria, this item can change more than 100 times.
5 times in a day.
So that is where the divergence is. That does not mean Nigeria reporting high inflation mean that things are more expensive.
Okay.
Inflation is changes in prices. Some countries that are reporting is 0.2, 0.4. Things are higher there. However, income also commensurates. That is the problem in Nigeria. Inflation can be going up, but the income, let me follow the school of thought of this, my doctor.
Okay. Does not
move at the same level. For poverty level to be progressively reducing as prices of goods and services are going up, income level also ought to change so that the purchasing power will not be eroded by the increase in prices.
I like that your school of thought. Income level should be
All right, let's bring in Professor Ango now to probably react, also respond to some of those questions before I read out some of the questions and comments that I have.
I think you should read it out, then he picks up from there.
Some of the questions you read, and or rather the comments by viewers, and that is even the point. Most of them are saying something that I've been emphasizing, but let me put it a bit clearly. You know, what happened was that last year, prices of these food commodities increased substantially to the extent that farm gate price, for example, for soybeans at the time of harvest was about 90,000 per bag, which is like, but today is 75,000. Now, one of the persons that sent in their comments also mentioned something along this. Now, prices have crashed, while at the same time, prices of fertilizer had increased substantially. Now, and then another comment, I had another comment, I think by Dr. Okwengo or somebody, that was talking about what happened to the blending plants, and then what happened, you know, because over 30 of them were sustained during the last regime. They were resuscitated because of the various trips by the former president, the late president, you know, to Morocco, to other places where they get some inputs for production of fertilizer. Before that government came in, that was before 2015, what we are experiencing now is what was experienced then. That is, if a typical farmer sells a bag of maize, you know, as at that time, you know, I mean, let's say towards the end of Jonathan's time, he needs to sell 2 bags of maize to buy 1 bag of fertilizer. Now, of course, when President Buhari came in, he tried to resuscitate these blending plants and all that, and it came to a point whereby you sell 1 bag and you can now buy 2 bags of fertilizer. What happened, or what is happening right now, is that last year, like I said, farm gate price at the time of harvest, you know, you are taking of maize at 60,000 naira or something, but now maize is 35,000 naira. Meanwhile, fertilizer is 50, 60,000 naira, 70,000 naira. So we are back to square zero. So the implication of this is that already farmers are not, this year, for this season, most farmers are not producing maize. Most farmers are producing the condiments, you know, like red pepper, other products that are not the real food that people need. I don't know what will happen. So perhaps maybe what will happen is to continue importation, and that is not a solution. So that's why I said when government is making policy, they have to weigh the various options. Most important, I think, of all securities is food security. We must ensure we have food security. As populous as India is, as populous as China is, they are able to feed themselves. In fact, as it is, the rice that we imported now largely is from Thailand or from India. So if they could feed themselves, and we are not able to feed ourselves because of policies we are doing and somersault in policies, And somebody was saying about anchor borrowers. Yes, anchor borrowers had some challenges, but anchor borrowers helped. Substantially, we had reached a point where we could feed over 90% of our rice demand, which is the highest, I believe, the most staple food in Nigeria. We were able to do it, locally. But this is not the case. Farmers are not producing so much rice this year. They're not producing so much of the other products this year. So government, what they need to do, which is essential, that's why I say you have to balance it. Balance the monetary side by making sure that not too much money is in circulation. But on the fiscal side, what government need to do, is to ensure that they either, not take the prescription of the IMF or World Bank that says don't subsidize, whereas some of these countries that we're importing from at much cheaper prices because they were subsidizing their own countries. So rather than take this prescription, support inputs, especially fertilizer and herbicides and other inputs that farmers need, subsidize that. But more than that, guarantee prices for farmers. If you don't want to do that, okay, leave it. But guarantee prices for farmers so that the farmer that produces knows that he's not going to produce at a loss. If he's not going to produce at a loss, government then can now stock the reserves. What happened last year when prices were so high, government said they were bringing out 40-something thousand, I think 43,000 metric tons. I don't know where they got it from because I doubt if they had those in their silos. But nonetheless, whatever it is, government need to maintain a balance, ensure that the farmer does not lose, so that the farmer is encouraged to produce, and while at the same time ensuring that it's not too costly. And that can be achieved in many ways. Government can now directly sell to some organized people like employees, public employees and all that. If you are selling goods to them directly, they don't go to the market. There is no way the market, will be so high. You can balance it. That is more strategic and that is more beneficial rather than, resorting, to short-term importation. Just import, dump it, and then make all of those people to lose. And then they are already poverty-stricken. So now they become even more poor. And then what do we do? Because this year, I have a farm that is like 60 hectares. 40 hectares people have hired from me. And instead of what they did last year, whereby most of them planted maize, this year, most of them are planting red pepper. Only one of them or so is planting maize. So I can see directly from my own customers, if you like, what is happening. And that, in the long run, is even much more, is more harmful to the economy than not producing the food. So we must ensure that we help these farmers, whatever way it is, find ways. Of course, there are ways people are circumventing and taking advantage of these situations. It's better to find ways to manage this and ensure that we have produced enough food to feed ourselves, rather than to say we are dependent on other people to feed us. A country of close to 300 million, a country that is going to be number 3 by 2050 at 450 million, I don't think we can resort to short-term measures. And, this issue about our economy being in transition, I don't know when the transition, Chibni, I don't know when this transition will end. We have been in transition for too long. And I think we need to stabilize some things, and, we need to know, especially food security, to guarantee it. And I want to say something. Apart from, as part of the security situation in the country, especially as it affects the northwest of Nigeria, where I live now, I want to encourage the governors, to adopt similar strategy. In Kaduna today, we have succeeded in reducing substantially, especially in the Bernungwari axis, this issue of banditry and all that. If this is solved here, but it's not solved in Zamfara, or it's in Sokoto, in Katsina, it doesn't solve anything, because what it means is that those who are not cooperating with this system, they will move there, operate, and then come back to Kaduna as a safe haven or somewhat. So I want to encourage all the governors to work together, to ensure whatever it is that will bring peace, so that there will be a lot of more farms that will be opened, for food production.
Very much, Professor Ango. I believe the governors have heard you, and they would also subscribe to your suggestion this morning. And since we said the economy is in transition, Chief, So when will the transition end? Anyway, let's take some of these questions so that you and Dr. Okengu can respond to some of these comments and questions. This one says, hello, good morning to you. The factors increasing inflation in Nigeria at the moment are the food shortages caused by the insecurities in our food belt regions. The supply of money in circulation is way much more than the demand. We have too much money chasing few goods. My question is, do we still have reserves of basic food and grains? Now, the second one says, good morning. I really appreciate this issue for discussion today. My question is, what are the practical solutions to the challenges we have on goods and services? That's from Arabi Kende Paul. This one says, the effect of reduced inflation now is not an issue. The government needs to look at the production of food because input to farmer has not changed. What it means is that government will continue to import food. That means the local farmers will not go to farms. Kush, Peter, Kukui. Now, this one is, my questions as follows. Wow, he has about 5 questions. So, how have recent government policies, e.g. fuel subsidy removal, FX rate unification, impacted food prices? We've talked about that. What role does insecurity in farming regions, e.g. banditry, other farmers' clashes, play in disrupting food supply? What is the impact of the recent rebasing of the consumer price index CPI to 2024 on the reported food inflation rate? Which population groups are most affected by the rising food prices? Is it the low-income earners or the rural dwellers? What percentage of Nigeria's food supply is still heavily dependent on imports? And how is this affecting local prices? Now, this one says, should the Central Bank of Nigeria focus more on monetary tightening of ore or food production incentives to fight inflation? How can Nigeria balance food sufficiency goals with the need for food affordability? Thank you. Then this one is, good morning, about what you are discussing. The food prices, the major problem we have is the transporters. They are the problem. Government should call them to order. The price of transportation of goods to the market is too much. So let's look at this last one. Let me just take this last one so that you can respond to it. It's like, good morning. I am Lukman Adeni Sapele from Delta State. I want to thank you for bringing people of clinical knowledge on issues of information in the country. Their contributions are exact and point blank. My contribution is that government should make efforts in connecting farm settlement from rural areas to the market through road infrastructure. It's difficult for most of them getting farm produce to the consumers. I have seen on first hand farm produce such as much as desired plantain rotting away due to lack of smooth transportation. Okay, let's start from Dr. Okengu.
Thank you very much. Let me thank my friend from Jos. I'm actually a Jos person. I have roots there. It would be nice to meet you someday. Back to the issues. I think we are dealing with raw materials as finished products. It's also important to get that so that we don't delink industry, okay, from food production. Because we seem to be focused on some kind of subsistence production systems. Okay, plantain is supposed to support even your medical industries to a very large extent, but you have to have those volumes. So it's also important that in discussing food, we also discuss industry. And in discussing industry, this is where these links that somebody had mentioned will come, transportation and all that. If you don't put that cost into the value process, then you load it onto the immediate off-taker, which now becomes a farmer. Okay, but if it's stretched a little bit, all right, like I don't know, I was discussing the potato industry, and if you just go and do a check on the potato industry, in the US, it's about $300 million potato, and how it values to rail links, industries, power stations, and all that. Because they don't have potato farms, they have potato belts. And you see, sometimes when you talk about food belts, I mean, I noticed in your intro, I heard you talking about belts. I wouldn't even know where you have a plantation. Okay, you need to have a plantation before you can start now belting it. Now, we don't have food belts anywhere in Nigeria anymore. We used to before, but it's no longer existing. It's work in progress, and we must commend government. For us, let us start with what we came here to discuss. It's a big deal, okay, that our inflation is dipping. It's a big deal. It should be celebrated. It shows that there has been some consistency, in the plan to pull us out. Remembering, this might not be nice to some people's ears, that this is going to be a 10 to 15-year march. If we're going to be marching out of it, I mean, we could quicken it a little bit, but it shows that there has been some fiscal and monetary discipline going forward. So if we keep at this rate, and I'm sure by the time they do the rebasing, we're going to be having more good news. That's not where the issues are. The issues are at the back end. And at that back end, Demola, we will need to restructure the country. Do we have the compendium of farms and what they produce? Do we have an aggregation point where products are now, aggregated into volumes? Do we have you, Demola, who is allowed by law, okay, producing something in front of your house? It's called homestead or rooftop or urban agriculture. Please permit me to say this. As this young man have gotten very in MO, they came from a Ministry of Agriculture to our center, and he took a bag of cassava. His name is Engineer Rashid. And this morning, this is the third time he's posting. Out of that one bag of cassava that he took from our center, he's now multiplied it into 12 more bags in his house. And these are the kind of officers that should be celebrated and encouraged.
Okay,
I don't see you not doing the same thing, or you too.
We're running out of time. Let's have your final thought, Mr. Dr. Akisuju.
Sorry for that.
sorry for that.
Well, I think I have to go back to when the transition will end. A transition is a transition until we feel it's ending, until we feel the crystallization of the policies that triggered the transition in the first instance. Okay. But I think where we are going, already there's a direction.
Okay.
We had moved from a high of a 40-point-something food inflation rate sometimes in 2024. We are talking of 21.97. And these are realistic price changes, So to that extent, we are moving. Okay. And of course, just like I said, there are targets, and those targets are being accomplished. I believe in the next 3 or 4 months, the CBN target of 21.4 will be achieved. And I hope, that the federal government target of 15%, perhaps by December, may come to pass, even if it's just about 16% that we achieved. It will also impact, generally speaking.
Okay. Mr. Ni Akisuju, Finance and Investment expert, Chairman, Independent Media and Policy Initiative. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Insight into this conversation. Dr. Emeka Okengu, Development Economist. You have fans all over the place. Thank you so much. And Dr. Ayo Anthony, Head Prizes Division, National Bureau of Statistics, NBS. As usual, it's a pleasure to have you come in here and explain all the technical jargons and also from our Kaduna studio, Professor Ishua Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship and Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics, Kaduna State University. It's a pleasure having you on the program. Thanks for your time. And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Thank you so much for watching. I am Jumai Yusuf.
And I'm Ademola Adeye. Do have a pleasant day.